Alright, learners, we're going to do activity 10, number 2, on page 50 of your textbooks. This is a program that will allow a teacher to display how many learners have contributed to a class trip and what is the total amount that has been received so far. So that's the basics of the program, and you can read more about it in your textbook, but I'm going to show you how to write the code. So you get the program open, and then we have to decide. The person is, this is like a program the teacher will use, and each time somebody comes to give money in, she's not going to worry about the name of the person, only worried about the amount. And in the add button, she's going to basically, we need code that will run a total of the amount entered, and as well as that, count how many times this button has been clicked, because each time the add button is clicked, another person has given in an amount towards the class trip. So the amount is entered there and the add button is clicked. So just note that the add button is to count how many times, how many people have actually entered, have actually given money in for the class trip. And in the add button, we also want to have a running total of the amount that was entered in, was given in. So what we have to do for that, because we're going to be doing counting and totaling for each time this button is clicked, we therefore have to have a global variable. If we make if we make them local to this button click event, in other words, the variables are declared in the button click event itself, then we're not going to have a running total. We can try it and see. I'll make inum being the number of people, and r amount, r total being the amount of money, the total amount of money that is received. Now you must know that whenever we want to count or have a running total of something, we use this plus how many people were coming in, and then this will be a running total plus the amount that is entered into the edit box, edt amount. But of course that's a string, so we say string to float edt amount dot text. Now, where did I get the string to float from? Well, that's a function that you know about already. We know that we on the left hand side we have a real number, so on the right hand side that whole thing must be a real number as well. But edt amount dot text is a string, therefore we convert it to a floating point number or a decimal point number. Another word for it is float and decimal, same. This is how we know string to float. That's the only function name that you can use. Over here, convert the string to a real number, string to float. Right, you know that already, so I don't know why I'm repeating it. But what you don't know yet, or maybe you don't know so well yet, is that when you do a running total, this is the instruction you use. R total equals the previous R total plus the amount that you want to add to your running total. If you want to count, say inum equals inum plus 1, because each time we click the button, it represents one person more that has contributed. Now these are running totals and counters, and the rule is we have to set them to 0 first, because if they are local variables, we have to set them to 0 because they're going to be some random number. Numbers are always randomly allocated by the processor in local, when you use local variables. But as a matter of habit, you always must set your counters and your totaling variables to 0. Now that is the code. You might think that it's correct, but if you think carefully, what's going to happen is each time this button is clicked, you double click add, each time it's clicked, what's happening, we're setting our num and our total to 0. And it's only going to be one person that will be shown or displayed. We want to go and do our display quickly. We have P&L num learners. So output P&L num learners, and another one P&L total amount. So we need to display those two things, our num and our total, into those panels. P&L num learners dot caption equals, now it's a string on the left, so on the right hand side you've got to take our num and convert it to a string. Int to string, and then for the other panel, output panel P&L total amount dot caption equals float to string, and I'm going to choose a formatting tool, F, R total, comma, FF currency, comma 8, comma 2. Now I have explained this in a previous video if you watched it. Float to string with an F in, after it. We'll take 4 parameters, the first one being the real number that you're converting to a string. See, it's float to string. The second parameter is what kind of display do you want? Do you want just a fixed point decimal, or do you want it in currency format? And there are others, but you don't have to worry about anything else in that. Those two, FF fixed or FF currency. FF currency will put the rand symbol in front of it, and then the 8 means the total number of digits that must be displayed, including the decimals. I always choose an 8, gives me a large enough number. You can choose 10 or whatever number there. And then 2 means we're rounding it to 2 decimal points. If we had a -2, then we're going to be rounding it to the hundreds. But 2 means 2 decimal points. If it's 3, then you're going to round to the 3rd decimal point. It's 1, you round to the 1st decimal point. We will just keep it at 2. Now that is taking the real number and converting it to a string, but formatting it with that capital F at the same time. Now, if I run this program, we'll see what will happen. Don't forget, we've declared our variables over here, and we've initialized them to 0 over there. They are counters and our totaling variables. So let's run the program and see. Any number, and then add. See there? Okay, so we know, but what about the second person that comes in? They enter that amount and add. See, nothing's happening here. All it's doing is just showing a 1 and the amount that we entered over there. That is because we made a mistake. We declared our variables as local over here, and we initialized them to 0 each time. Because that's what the processor does. It looks at what we've done. Okay, we've got 2 of these variables. Processor comes here and says, okay, I've got this variable, I've got that one, and then set them to 0, both of them, and then add 1 to our num, and then add this amount to our total, and display the 2 things over here. Okay, so the processor does exactly what we've told it to do. But we don't actually want that, because we can't set it to 0 each time. So therefore we make them global. So we will have a proper running total. Now here's one place to put global variables. There is another place. There's the one place where we put our global variables. This means that any other program can see them and use them. If you want to keep them private, we're going to put them over here under private. Which means they are now variables that only this program can use. Works the same way, just that other programs can't see them now because they're stuck there. We call it class scope. We'll learn more about that later. Anyway, so now we've got our global variables there. But do we still want to set them to 0 each time we click the button? No, well, we'll run the program and let's see what's going to happen. I'll put 125.4 there and I'll add. Then I'll put another amount and add. Can you see it's the same thing? Hasn't changed anything because we set them to 0 over here. Silly. Take that out. We have to set it to 0 in the on activate event. In fact, it is a fact that you actually don't need to set counters to 0 if they're global variables, but we do it anyway. So I'm going to go to my events here and then go to on activate and double click. Then I will basically set rnum equal to 0 there in on activate. So what is on activate? The processor does everything in on activate before the user clicks any buttons, etc. So before anything happens in the form, this on activate will start first. That processor will do that code first. Now we've basically fixed it all up. Let's go and see now what can happen. Now definitely going to work. We have our counter variable that's global and our totaling variable that's global. I made R total real because I'm dealing with money here and I know that's a real number. Whenever you're dealing with currency, it's always a real number. And by the way, this FF currency over here defaults to the system currency settings, which obviously in our country is R for Rand. So you click play, go and see. 100 Rand, one person, second person maybe 54.5. Can you see there? Now it's adding nicely. Let's add another 120.9. As you can see, now it's working perfectly fine. Right, so that is that, and happy studying.